B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins News and Comment. It's Monday, October 21st, 2019. The ripple effect of Hillary Clinton's careless smears of Tulsi Gabbard and Jill Stein, the 2016 Green Party candidate, continue to be felt. So on Friday, I reported that Hillary Clinton, the losing candidate from 2016, appeared on a podcast hosted by an Obama campaign guy, David Plouffe, and without naming Tulsi Gabbard, she made it very clear who she was talking about, and without offering any evidence whatsoever, she attacked Gabbard as a tool of Russia.
Tonight, Hillary Clinton pushes her own Russia conspiracy theory. In a recent podcast, Clinton says Russians are grooming a 2020 presidential contender. That candidate is Tulsi Gabbard. Here's Hillary Clinton.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
Okay, so just a fact, huh? Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian asset and Jill Stein's a Russian asset. Out front now, Van Jones, host of the Van Jones Show. So that's how she puts it out there. I mean,
she's playing a very dangerous game. I mean, Hillary Clinton, if you're concerned about disinformation, if you're concerned, what the Russians do is they spread disinformation, they get us divided against each other. That is what just happened. Just throw out some information, disinformation, smear somebody. She is Hillary Clinton. She's a legend. She's going to be in the history books. She's a former nominee of our party, and she just came out against a sitting U.S. Congresswoman, a decorated war veteran, and somebody who's running for the nomination of our party with just a complete smear and no facts.
She called her a Russian asset as a fact, and as you point out, sitting U.S. Congresswoman.
A sitting U.S. Congresswoman. Now, this is a very, very dangerous game, and there's a backstory here. And there's two sides to every story. Let's not forget, Tulsi Gabbard was picked out by the Democratic Party establishment and put at the top of the DNC. They thought she was going to be their golden girl. And she got in that position, the DNC, and she looked around. She saw Debbie Wasserman Schultz and other people, Clinton allies, doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing in the primary. And Tulsi publicly quit and then endorsed Bernie Sanders. And it's been payback hell ever since.
And that's what we are here. But
payback hell ever since.
Gabbard's responded with a tweet storm. She says, "Thank you, Hillary Clinton. You, the queen of warmongers, embodiment of corruption and personification of the rot that has sickened the Democratic Party for so long, have finally come out from behind the curtain. From the day I announced my candidacy, there has been a concerted campaign to destroy my reputation. We wondered who was behind it and why. Now we know it was always you. Through your proxies and powerful allies in the corporate media and war machine, afraid of the threat I pose, it's now clear this primary is between you and me. Don't cowardly hide behind your proxies. Join the race directly."
So, this is pretty remarkable. CNN, anchored by Aaron Burnett, and with her guest commentator Van Jones. And I'll tell you, I knew Van Jones when he was a community organizer here in the Bay Area before he went to the Obama White House and then got his perch at CNN. And I can't tell you how rare it is for one of these high-paid anchors and or commentators to step out of line and to call Hillary Clinton's behavior exactly what it is. Now, it was a moment, and I haven't watched CNN since then. In fact, just to let you know, I don't watch ever the Sunday morning political shows. I just think they're a waste of time. People show up with their talking points, and that's about all they do. They parade and offer their talking points. So I found this remarkable. And, of course, Van Jones will be followed by many others who will agree with Hillary Clinton, who will point to the excessive reporting that RT does, apparently on behalf of the Gabbard candidacy. But nobody asks, when was the last time, other than the debate last week, that Tulsi Gabbard was invited to appear on a political show on CNN or MSNBC? And so these smears are enabled by the behavior of media and political leaders who marginalize a candidate like Tulsi Gabbard. And as I have told you as recently as Friday, I am intrigued by Tulsi Gabbard. I value her voice. I want her views in this political primary. I don't expect her to win, and I don't personally expect to vote for her. But she has made a remarkable contribution just last week in helping define Pete Buttigieg, and we'll get to the story in a moment that he's rising in the polls. She helped define Pete Buttigieg as a stooge of the military-industrial complex and an apologist for neocon wars. And he's doubling down. He's continuing to argue the points that they exchanged in the debate last Tuesday night. And what is so ironic to me as I look at the cult of people who have undying loyalties to Hillary Clinton. She's on a book tour with Chelsea. Their book is called Gutsy Women. And at minimum, even if Hillary doesn't agree with anything that Tulsi Gabbard stands for, can't she acknowledge that she is a gutsy woman coming from a small state like Hawaii? A member of Congress climbing the ladder here, trying to attempt to become president of the United States. Isn't that gutsy? Well, it doesn't count. Because Tulsi Gabbard is not a promoter or apologist for corporate America, for the military complex, for the endless wars. And let me be clear, Tulsi's positions are uneven. I applaud what she says about the ongoing regime change wars. But she doesn't have a clear position that I support on Israel and Palestine, and her stinky vote in August for the resolution that denies me the right to boycott Israel has not been forgotten. But I'm 100% behind Tulsi in this current skirmish. And I don't think I have played a clip from CNN here in a long, long time. But that is a moment where Aaron Burnett and Van Jones set themselves apart from the rest of those talking heads. So I do believe that Tulsi has gone a little bit too far. I don't object to calling Hillary a warmonger. But by trying to reduce the race to Tulsi versus Hillary, and by trying to goad her to actually join the process for 2020, that's a dare I do not want to be out there, because it does look like Hillary is quietly making moves to be drafted. And it will be her cult of followers, the superdelegates who made her the nominee in 2016, despite the clear evidence of her self-inflicted wounds and her lack of any growth opportunity. And are we going to witness an effort by the Clintons to try one more time to jam Mrs. Clinton onto the top of our government? Now, one of the other things that is sad to see here, I've heard comments from Beto O'Rourke, from Andrew Yang, and Marianne Williamson. Pretty strong support for Tulsi Gabbard against Hillary Clinton. But I haven't heard Bernie Sanders speak up. Now, I know he was busy with his big Brooklyn rally over the weekend and the adulation from the endorsement from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But it's important to stand up. And Tulsi Gabbard was a gutsy woman in 2016. As you heard, this is largely payback for her endorsement of Bernie Sanders. So, Bernie, get on the right side of this one, will you? Now, to her overall credit, despite some of her comments being a little bit shrill in my view, the Gabbard campaign sees this as an opportunity to move up, to establish some momentum. And she appeals to people's patriotism. If they can falsely portray me as a traitor, then they can do it to anyone. And in fact, that's exactly the message they want to get across to you, that if you stand up against Hillary and the party power brokers, if you stand up to the rich and powerful elite and the war machine, they will destroy you and discredit your message. So I think that this is a defining moment, and it defines the Democratic Party. And many people labor under the illusion that because I am so liberal and progressive that I must be a Democrat. I left the Democratic Party more than 20 years ago. It was because of the Clintons. And to see this play out again, deja vu all fucking over again, is just mind-boggling to me. And to see women attack this woman, Tulsi Gabbard, using the smears that Hillary has offered and then amplifying and expanding them. Some of you from the West Coast know who Christine Kraft is. She was a groundbreaking news anchor who sued over sex discrimination back in the 1970s. She worked in talk radio alongside me and many others at KGO here in San Francisco. She's nominally progressive, but she is part of the Hillary cult. And they reflexively will strike anyone who appears to threaten their Hillary. So Kraft just goes into stream of consciousness here on Facebook. Gabbard, no accomplishments in Congress, constantly telling us what a combat hero she is. Not true. Swoons when Assad gives her a Peshima scarf. Spouts Ruski talking points forever. Not smart. Zombie-like effect. Pretends to surf but can barely stand up. I don't really know anything about her surfing skills, and I don't care. Will appeal to the Bernie bots who want free everything and don't want to vote for a centrist Democrat who can beat Trump. Well, it rolls it all right there. And these are the kinds of smears that I'm hearing from the forever Hillary types. There was a book event here in San Francisco yesterday. One of my old radio producers, a woman I respect, posted a selfie on Facebook of herself with some sort of a, rebel T-shirt on, saying, and her hashtag at the end was, with her forever. I'm sorry. I'm not with any politician forever. And I think that's, it speaks to the people who are drawn to Hillary Clinton. Matt Taibbi gets it right. In Rolling Stone, headline, "Everyone is a Russian asset." He quotes her comments, Hillary's comments, to David Plouffe. And then he says, Hillary Clinton is nuts. She's also not far from the Democratic Party mainstream, which has been pushing the same line for years. Less than a week before Clinton's outburst, the New York Times ran a feature called What Exactly is Tulsi Gabbard Up To? That's what I led the podcast with last Monday, calling it Yellow Journalism. Taibbi continues, this was the second such article the Times had written. An August piece, headlined Tulsi Gabbard Thinks We're Doomed, hit nearly all the same talking points. Quoting Clint Watts, an ex-spook from the same think tank, calling Gabbard the Kremlin's preferred Democrat and a useful agent of influence. And this started with an NBC report back in March, based on the Hamilton 68 dashboard, which is a scurrilous and spurious source. And they are smearing Gabbard because certain odious people support her. From David Duke to now Donald Trump. Yes, Trump has defended Tulsi Gabbard from Hillary's smears, and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, to my knowledge, have not yet uttered a word about it. More from Taibbi. Everyone is foreign scum these days. Democrats spent 3 years trying to prove Donald Trump is a Russian pawn. Mitch McConnell is Moscow Mitch. Third-party candidates are a Russian plot. The Bernie Sanders movement is not just a wasteland of racist and misogynist bros, but according to intelligence agencies and mainstream pundits alike, the beneficiary of an ambitious Russian plot to stoke the divide. So I recommend Matt Taibbi's piece. I've linked to it in the show file for today's podcast. So the Suffolk University and USA Today poll released today shows in Iowa, Joe Biden down to 18%, Elizabeth Warren at 17%, that is a tie, and Buttigieg edging up to 13%. Bernie Sanders showed a 9% level of support in Iowa, and the next tier of candidates were all at 3% or below. 29% say that they are undecided. And Sanders came back on the campaign trail, as I mentioned, with a big Brooklyn rally, 26,000 people there, if you care about crowd size. It was in Queensbridge Park, and that's right at the end of the 59th Street Bridge. And if you know the Simon & Garfunkel song, I'll bet they were all feeling groovy there on Saturday. Michael Moore came out on the stage, and he has endorsed Bernie again. And he had some good lines. He said, we've heard that Bernie is too old. He said, well, the Electoral College is too old. A $7 minimum wage, that's too old. Women not being paid the same, that's too old. Superdelegates. And the crowd got the rhythm and said, too old. And then Ocasio-Cortez endorsed him, and Sanders said, I am back. But it is an uphill struggle, and the media continues to marginalize where he is strong, whether it's his fundraising numbers or actual polling numbers. And I'll never shade or lie to you about polls that are beneficial to one candidate and harmful to another. I think the polls are only it's sticking your finger up to see what the wind is doing. Meanwhile, Julian Castro, one of the early candidates I gave $1 to so we could see him on the debate stage, he is threatening to pull out of the race if he can't raise $800,000 in the next 10 days. He hasn't mentioned his police reform plans since early in the campaign. That's what drew me to him. A lot of people, like me, are fond of Robert Reich. He was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Labor back in the first term. He now teaches at the University of California, Berkeley, and I've seen him a few times tooling around Berkeley in a little Mini Cooper. But he's a man of big opinions, and I strongly disagree with his weekly column that showed up today in The Guardian. He said the nominee for 2020 will be Biden, Warren, or Sanders. Everyone else is irrelevant. Now, he says nice things. He loves them all 20 plus who ran at one time. But he said by the November debates, he only wants to see 3 people on the stage. And I hear this a lot. And it's dead wrong. Just one indication is Buttigieg is moving up in the polls. He could bump Bernie Sanders out of that top 3. And I want voters to have a shot at the candidates before the field is narrowed by the media and the managers at the DNC. And I'm sorry, Robert Reich, you are dead wrong about this. Let the voters decide. The field will narrow by itself, as we just saw from Julian Castro's fundraising dilemma. We don't need to take other action to eliminate candidates. The process will run its course. So Nancy Pelosi has released her own fact sheet of what she describes as Trump's gross abuse of power, dividing it into the shakedown, a pressure campaign, and the cover-up. And this is a tactical maneuver because the Republicans are running a pointless exercise trying to get a unanimous vote of the Republican caucus, which would not carry the House, of censure for Adam Schiff for his handling of the impeachment investigation. And I have my problems with Schiff, but this is purely a political stunt. And the Trump White House is whipping. There's some 23 Republicans who apparently have resisted voting for this measure. But that's the gamesmanship that is underway. Bill Taylor, the acting U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, will be testifying on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Not a lot of other impeachment news today because Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff were part of a delegation that visited Jordan and Afghanistan over the weekend. And they went to try to talk to, in Jordan, the King Abdullah, to try to settle nerves about the way Trump pulled U.S. troops out of Syria. Or did he? We'll get to that in a moment. And then they went on to Afghanistan, which, of course, is in turmoil with an incomplete election We don't know the clear result, and the situation remains pretty tenuous there. Speaking of Afghanistan, General Scott Miller, commander of American and NATO forces there, announced that he has secretly or quietly withdrawn 2,000 American troops over the last couple of months. And I don't know the significance of why they're announcing it today, because it appears that they're trying to show that Trump is ending the endless wars. And as we noted on Friday with Danny Serson's latest column, the Democrats risk becoming outflanked as Trump could posture as the anti-war candidate for 2020. It would change immediately after the election, but he is, unafraid and unashamed to say anything, do anything to reach his own goals. Every day I pause for a minute to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like John Morgan, Judy Holloway, Carla Mahoney, and Ben Brotman. Each one of them parts with a mere $5 a month. They put it into a PayPal account, and then eventually PayPal gives it to me. Would you participate in such a scheme to support my work? Well, I hope you will. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com, find the menu tab, click on Become a Subscriber. You'll hit the sign-up page, and in seconds you can choose the level of support that's comfortable for you. And if you prefer the U.S. mail, my P.O. Box is number 15660, San Rafael, California, 94915. And I want to mention this Thursday, I am moderating a panel on criminal justice reform, sponsored by the ACLU of Northern California. It's being held here in San Rafael. And I forgot to put up the link in Friday's podcast. I'll make sure to add it there and to put it in the show file for today's podcast as well. And if you are local, I'd love to have you come out and join us for this important discussion. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu had 2 days left to form a government showing that he could get a coalition of 61 seats in the Knesset. And he gave up 48 hours early, and it's his 70th birthday today, too. And he's not a happy birthday boy because, well, this reduces the prospect that he will continue as prime minister, which kills the immunity from prosecution for the 4 fraud cases, or maybe 3 have survived, that he is facing in the very near future. Now, do not underestimate, as George W. Bush would malaprop, Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party is only a little better than Netanyahu because he's not Netanyahu. But his policies, particularly related to the Palestinians, will probably be as ugly and draconian as Netanyahu's. So Gantz has 28 days to form a government. He needs a formal nod from the president, Reuven Rivlin, and he can then bargain with all of the other parties to try to put together a 61-seat coalition. If not, they'll have a third round of elections. So according to the New York Times headline here, U.S. withdrawal from Syria gathers speed amid accusations of betrayal. They waited until the 5th paragraph to interject Russia into this report. But despite the fact that members of both parties and the corporate media have been hysterically up in arms about Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria, well, he's now apparently backpedaling. He doesn't admit it, but his latest defense contractor turned Secretary of Defense, I had to think of that, Mark Esper, confirmed on Monday the United States is considering keeping a small force in northeastern Syria alongside the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces to prevent oil fields from falling into the hands of the Islamic State. The Times reported that Trump was leaning in favor of leaving perhaps 200 troops there. Wait a frickin' minute. There were 150 there last week. And now we're actually going to increase by 50 the number of American targets who are sandwiched between the forces of Assad and the renegade forces of Turkey's Erdogan? I don't get it. You can't trust anything this guy does. And as the U.S. is withdrawn from a city in Kurdish-held territory called Qam Ishli, residents threw rocks and potatoes at the military convoy. And Erdogan has gone public with something that has been speculated about for some time. According to the New York Times, he wants the bomb. He's quoted as saying, "Some countries have missiles with nuclear warheads. The West insists we can't have them. This I cannot accept." So this sets a new arms race in motion in the Middle East. And of course, the simplest way to deal with it would be to ask Israel to denuclearize. But instead, the Saudis want a bomb. The Iranians pretend they want a bomb because it gives them leverage. And now, under the tutelage of Pakistan's A.Q. Khan, the notorious nuclear physicist, Turkey is threatening to develop its own. Boris Johnson has got to be reeling like a fighter who went into a practice round without his helmet on. He's been pummeled from all sides. And today they closed off his last Brexit exit potential because John Bercow, that Speaker of the House of Commons with the bellowing voice, "Order!" Well, he established order by telling Boris Johnson that he would not permit the House of Commons to take up the matters that they avoided voting on Saturday. And Boris Johnson sent an unsigned letter to the European Union required by legislation asking for a delay of Brexit until the end of January. And then he sent a second letter arguing against that postponement. Now, this was driven in part by an estimated 500,000 people who protested in front of Parliament. Now, not all of them support Brexit. Not all of them are opposed. Many of them want a new chance to vote against Brexit. But it's clear that the country is highly confused, rudderless, and we really don't know what's going to happen next. But the clearest indication is that the EU will grant a delay until the end of January. London wasn't the only scene of protests on the streets. Hong Kong again, filled with protesters, an unauthorized pro-democracy rally on Sunday, and the people have taken to taunting the no-mask ban by wearing Halloween-style masks. Meanwhile, in Santiago, Chile, protests have been raging for a couple of days. 2 days of violent protest and looting in the capital of Chile. The president suspended a subway fare hike that had set off an intense wave of unrest, and we saw a subway station burning. We saw a transit bus that was burned in the streets. And this is the second time in a couple of weeks that a hardline right-wing government has had to yield to protests in South America. It was Ecuador just about 10 days ago. And in Beirut, Lebanon, a second day of demonstrations with a lot of tires set afire. Protesters massed downtown, marched on the presidential palace. They are upset about garbage in the streets. The government services have just basically broken down, and it does appear that people have reached the point of no return. And, of course, all across America, nobody went in the streets this weekend. They were all on their way to NFL games. Donald Trump held his cabinet hostage for over an hour this morning as reporters were in the room, and he just kept bantering with them. The humiliation you have to put up with to be one of Trump's cabinet officials is significant. So anyway, among other things, he decried the phony emoluments clause, saying that he had to back off on his plan to hold the G7 at the property he owns, the Doral in Miami, saying it would have been a wonderful event. He was going to do it for free. And this phony emoluments clause thing, well, it's the only thing that we have to rein him in. Because for whatever reasons, the federal ethics laws exclude explicitly the president and vice president. So I'm glad this case has, it's not resolved, it's just withdrawn. And that was the best thing he could do. So the censure resolution of Adam Schiff is being driven by Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs. He just wants Adam to know himself how disappointed we are. They have 173 Republicans on board so far, and some 20 or so are holding out or waiting to be bought off, I guess. Donald Trump Jr. is putting pressure on Republicans. I mean, anybody who would find him a persuasive guy needs to have their head examined. And Trump took fresh aim at Adam Schiff, calling him a crooked politician, suggesting without evidence that he might have been an informant to the whistleblower whose complaint sparked this impeachment investigation. So was there actually an informant, Trump said? Maybe it was Schiff. It could be Shifty Schiff. That's the obvious displacement of a guilty mind. Facebook has announced today that it had found and taken down 4 state-backed disinformation campaigns, 3 from Iran and 1 from Russia, which they attribute to that dreaded Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, the so-called troll farm. And the company doesn't want to be the arbiter of what speech will be allowed on the platform, but they are going to add more identifying information. For example, pages considered state-sponsored media like Russia Today will be flagged. And one of the preposterous things going on right now is Facebook treats paid advertisements from political campaigns the same as user posts. And I believe that we should have unfettered freedom of speech, even to post inaccurate information, but nobody who is paying to advertise on Facebook should be allowed to do that. We're also learning of back-channel communications between Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerberg and the campaign of Pete Buttigieg. Earlier this year, Zuck sent multiple emails to the campaign manager with names of individuals he was proposing be hired because they're experts on Facebook. Then Zuckerberg's wife, Priscilla, also sent multiple emails to the same campaign manager with staff recommendations, and 2 of those people have been hired. I think there should be a hands-off. The Clinton campaign declined the insertion of Facebook employees in 2016, and the Trump campaign didn't. I don't think this is a wise way to go. The investigation of the Russiagate investigation, the Mueller investigation, got some ink in the Sunday New York Times, based, of course, on all unnamed sources. They're told that it's moving along, and that John Durham, the prosecutor from Connecticut, who's been tasked by the Attorney General with this investigation, has been talking to about 20 people. But he hasn't talked to Peter Strzok. He hasn't talked to Gina Haspel, the CIA director, who was posted in London at the time of the 2016 activities. And so they say that we may see a report from Horowitz, the Inspector General, before we see anything from the efforts by John Durham. From England, Julian Assange appeared at a court hearing. He is described as stuttering and struggling. He had trouble telling the court his name. There was a long pause before he gave his date of birth. And whether he's being drugged or otherwise mistreated, he certainly is not doing well at the Belmarsh prison outside of London. And finally today, you may know that in Cleveland there is a federal court under the jurisdiction of Judge Dan Polster. And they have consolidated all of the cases that are being brought against opioid manufacturers and distributors. And today, just before a trial was set to begin, 1 manufacturer and 3 distributors made a settlement with 2 Ohio counties that had sued them. So it's a small agreement worth about $55 million. But it could be the boilerplate, the template, that will be used as a model for other settlements. And I think that the industry would be crazy to go to trial because juries will bleed them dry. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. Feel free to share it everywhere. You'll find it on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you.